Happy 4th of July, everyone. In celebration of this Independence Day, I made 2 flags. One is a really easy and quick build that can be done with minimal tools. The other one requires a couple more advanced tools and techniques to build. And one of the two has a really neat feature, which you'll see later. This was a really fun build, so stick around and check it out. Now there are a lot of YouTube videos out there on how to make wooden flags, so I figured I'd put my spin on it. When I'm done, I'll go over which one I liked making more, so you can make one yourself, or maybe mix and match methods. Whichever one you pick, I'm sure you'll have a lot of fun making it, so let's get after it. Here are all the products you're gonna need for these 2 builds. There are 3 colors of stain. You got a navy blue, crimson, and white. You're gonna want white spray paint for the stars. I'll show you what this easy tack is for. You'll have a clear gloss on the flags if you want them. You have to have a way to burn the wood. The mineral spirits will be used to clean off the easy tack. There's a neat trick you can use these razors for. I have a metric butt ton, so I'm going to use them for this project. Not necessary, but something that helps paint the stripes. You're going to want some kind of hanging hardware. I recommend you use a Dremel. It's just kind of the easiest way of doing it. And you can use 2 bits. There's a really fine bit. You can see that. That's going to get you the detail around the edges, and then to hog out the middle, you're going to use a little bit of a thicker bit here for the Dremel. I'll have links to all these products in the description. And if you so desire, you can put LEDs behind the flags, and I'll put a link to that in the description as well.
All right, let's get started. We're going to start with the plywood version first. Now this is 1/2-inch plywood, and you can make this cut with a circular saw and a straight edge. But one day I just bought this track saw because I was tired of doing that, and boy, has it made a difference. I love that thing. So you cut it to length, now you want to cut it to width, which I did on the table saw, and then you want to sand. Now you don't want to sand too much, you just want to knock off the high parts, round over the edges a little bit, and sand the sides. Now it's time to burn it.
Burn it.
This took a lot longer than I thought it was going to take. But once it started to burn, it kind of accelerated, so it gets away from you if you're not careful. Make sure you get the edges and the sides as well. It wouldn't look right if you had fresh plywood on the side of a burnt flag. Once I was done, it had kind of a wobble to it. I'm happy to say it straightened out by the end, but it had me worried. Then you want to mark for the stripes. Mark the side of the union. And then you want to connect the dots. So you want your pencil marks light enough that you can't see it after you stain, but dark enough that you can see them to put the painter's tape on. Time to mask off for the red. This painter's tape wasn't quite wide enough to fit, so I had to do 2, which is actually a good thing, just to overlap them. And then once you're done, just press down on all the edges so none of the stain bleeds over. And then it's time to stain some red. You need to put kind of a light coat, nothing too heavy. And then once you're done with the last stripe, you can get a rag and then wipe off starting at the first stripe, and it all looks real uniform. When you pull the tape off, just kind of do it slow. For me, it was pulling up some of the fibers of the plywood, so it was a little bit rough. Then it's time to tape again for the white. Same as before. A little stain, a little white. Tape comes off. And I got smart here. I pulled off multiple strips at once. And I really didn't wait between staining and then taping and tape for the blue. Then you want to put a coat of clear coat on, because for the next step you need this clear coat on there.
For this project, I'm going to go the easy route and I'm going to spray paint the stars on. For the other flag, I'm going to carve them, but I just want to see how this works. Now, instead of just taping the template down, I'm going to use what's called easy tack. And this will give me a good seal onto the board so that when I start spraying of the spray paint, it's not going to kick the template up, and then they won't look like stars. It'll just look like big blobs of paint under it.
Now, since I was spray painting, I wanted to make sure that I didn't get any overspray onto my stripes. Now, this Easy Tack product says to spray it on thoroughly and then let it sit for about 60 seconds so it gets tacky. And let me tell you, it gets real tacky. It was real hard to get this lined up just right. Press down around all the stars just so they stayed down. And I did light coats of spray paint here just because I didn't want to dwell over any of the stars and then get up under the template. Let that dry real well. You want it to be dry whenever you pull it off, and then just be real slow about pulling this template off. The haziness you see there is the Easy Tack, which came off pretty easily with mineral spirits. Now, you want to be very precise with the mineral spirit. You don't want to get any of it on the stars itself, because mineral spirits will also pull off the paint. So I basically went around each star that had Easy Tack on it. You can kind of feel the stickiness. But I made that mistake. You can see on this star, just on that point there, I got a little too much mineral spirits on it, so I had to go fix that. Now, I'm using some of the cutoffs from the hardwood version for the hanging hardware for this one. Now, for the to hang this, I'm going to do French cleats. It's a super strong option. It's real easy to hang, and it's real easy to find studs in any position. So this is the side that'll be on the board, and this is the side that'll be on the wall, and they just mate together. I put it about 3 inches down from the top and centered it as best I could, and I was going to tack it into place. But you got to have some bullets in the gun, so. Alright, let's try that again. My plan was to screw these in from the back with 3 screws, so that's why I'm pre-drilling here. But then when I got to looking at the screw, I realized that it had to go through the French cleat into 1/2-inch plywood, and it just wasn't going to be enough to grip, or worst case, it'll blow through the front. So I just decided to glue and brad nail this on the back. It's plenty strong. It's just 1/2-inch plywood. This is just the great thing about woodworking, is that you can foresee potential problems and then come up with solutions on the fly. And since French cleats make the board sit away from the wall, I put a couple of cleats down at the bottom because I want a uniform distance away from the wall all the way around for the LEDs that I'm about to attach. So I just did these small cleats. It's not structural, so 3 or 4 brad nails, and it was good. Alright, and there she is. She's a beauty. Now, for the LEDs, I wanted the LED strips to be uniformly spaced away from the edges. This isn't really necessary, but it kind of fed my perfectionism here. Now, I worked a long time off camera to kind of figure out how I wanted to do this. 1 strip is not long enough to go all the way around, but 2 strips would make it overlap. So what I ended up doing was starting one on the middle, working one direction, and then starting the other one from the middle and working the opposite direction. And that's what she looks like. Very nice. Here's what it looks like with a little bit of light in the background. Gives it a cool look. But I turned the lights all the way off, and this is what it looks like. You can't see the flag, but man, I think it looks awesome. Like a nightlight or something. Alright, let's work on the hardwood version. For this one, I used a 10-foot 1x10, which gets you more than enough wood for the whole project. And I went over to the table saw and I cleaned off one edge, and then I moved the fence over to 1.5 inches, and then I just went to ripping off strips. Even though it gets you more than 13, you're going to want to cut a few extras. And here's why. When you lay them out, you want to look for some that you may not want to use, maybe because of knots like this. Maybe you do want the knots. But you want to get it in a good orientation to where you have some good character, some alternating character. And for me, I wanted to make sure I didn't have any knots in the union because I didn't want to run over a knot with the Dremel in case it like kicked a chunk out or something. And now it's time to get burning. I usually started on the ends and make sure I got the tops because I would forget. And I also burnt one side and then burnt the other side so it was cooled off so I could hold it. And I was done. A little celebratory drum solo. Now it's time to mark for the razor blades, and so you want to make sure you get the left side all aligned. Use the template to mark a line. And here I'm just setting the white stripes out of the way. A little tappy tap tap with the razor blades. Don't cut your finger. And you just want to get the razor blades in enough to cut those fibers so the stain doesn't bleed over into the blue side. Then I did all the red stain. And just like with the other one, you just wipe off as soon as you're done with the last board. Now it's time for the blue.
You're my boy, Blue!
Same deal. I actually broke one of these razors when I was tapping it in, so you got to be real careful. I probably would wear gloves next time. And then once the blue is done, you're done staining, so I started to put it all back together. You want a red stripe on the top and a red stripe on the bottom. And there it is, all reassembled. Now it's time to put the backers on. So I wanted to do this by the numbers because I knew I'd screw it up if I didn't. So I flipped the boards one at a time. Aligned them to the side again. And then I clamped them in place so they didn't move. Now I centered this back piece from the top and the bottom because I didn't want it to be seen. And I glued and brad nailed this, but I put 2 brad nails per each front board just so there wouldn't be any movement. And then I turned it around and did the other side. And then I put one brace in the middle, which I think I would do differently next time. I'll talk about that at the end of the video. But this worked for the purposes of this project. Next was time for the Dremel, which I knew I was going to be sitting for a while, so I went and got my stool. So when you sit down, you put the template down, make sure you got the pointy end of the star facing up relative to the flag. You do not want to spray these stars upside down. Tape it down, then use a real sharp pencil to outline the stars. Once you start the Dremel, sneak up on the line, because until you get the hang of it, you're going to be kind of sloppy. I found that going left to right in a straight line was the best way for me to be accurate. So I did that on all the stars and then turned it, and then I did it from a different direction. As I got a little smoother at it, I would shift my body to get multiple lines going without having to move the flag. Then it was time to hog out the middle. Now this is a lot more forgiving, but you still want to be careful with it. Just make sure you take your time and take breaks. This will wear you out pretty quick. It's pretty tedious work, so by the time I got to the last star, it wasn't really fun anymore.
taking all the fun out of the job.
And here's what they look like done. It's time to burn.
Turn it up high, Reggie. I want to burn.
These stars burned actually really quickly. It kind of surprised me on the first one. You want to keep the flame pretty far away from the star because it'll actually darken the blue as well. But just take your time and go one by one and go back over some that are a little lighter than others. And now's the time for clear coat. Now this one can of clear coat got me a few coats on each board. So you could probably get 4 or 5 coats on just one flag. And then it was time to install the hanging hardware. So I just marked about 1 inch down. I should have done about 3 inches down, but this works. Pre-drilled. I'm going to use some screws with some washer heads on them. And then wrap the wire around it and then twist the wire against itself and then screw the screws in, and that washer will pinch it against the wood and it makes it super secure. And then I did the same thing for the other side. And you want to make sure and pull it nice and taut. And that's it. She's all done. I'm really happy with the way it turned out.
All right. So in the military, after a big exercise or event, we like to sit down and think about the lessons that we learned. Maybe it's something that we really did well, and so we want to write it down to make sure we do it well the next time. Or an area where we need to improve so that we can incorporate that next time as well. Now, this was my first time doing some of these techniques, and so I learned a lot. First, when you're burning the wood, keep the torch moving. If you stop too long on one spot, it'll burn quickly. This is especially important when you're burning the stars because it's fresh wood, and so it'll burn a lot faster. Finally, just for expectation management, the burning took a lot longer than I thought it would, so take your time and be patient. Now on to the Dremel. I've seen a lot of makers use some fancy attachments. They're not necessary, but maybe they'll make you a little bit more comfortable because dremeling out the stars took me about an hour, and so you may want to be a little bit more comfortable than this kind of big beefy thing. It gets heavy after a while. Also, when you mark the outline of the stars with the stencil, make sure you draw crisp lines that you can see and sneak up on them, especially when you first start carving. I was really messy when I first got going until I got into the groove. Now, I had a blast making these, and I hope you get out into the shop and make one for yourself. Let me know which one you liked better, or if you're going to mix and match techniques and make your own. For me, if I was cramped for time or I wanted to batch a bunch out to sell, I would use the plywood version, mostly because I wouldn't have to Dremel out the stars. But if you like this subdued look, you're going to have to carve out those stars. Reason being is you could just not stain the white stripes, but if you spray paint the white stars on, it's going to look kind of goofy compared to the bare wood. Well, that's it for this time. Let me know in the comments if you like this style of video, and make sure to stay tuned because I have more patriotic themed projects in the future, which makes sense because I am the Patriot Maker. We'll see you next time.